one item to center updates.
What item?
Initiative updates.
Up here after JL 0413. At 2020. Because we have a gap between one and confirmation. You see it?
Move to approve the agenda.
Second.
Is anyone opposed? Passed by general consent. Alright, so now we're going to get into the minutes from last meeting. Is there a motion?
I move to approve the minutes.
Second.
Anyone opposed? Would like me to continue? No, alright. I'm going to consent. So now we're going to get into our first new business line item, which is the Office of Equity and Inclusion. So Dr. Young emailed me a week and a half ago or so, and this is just a new office we put in just after the True Courage program, things like that. And so we have Dr. Young and Ms. Watson here to talk about what their role and what that office will do for students on campus.
Well, we're really delighted to have you here. We're hoping that Leo, one of the students that's been on the committee, will join us shortly. But in an interesting way, we represent the transition to a different point in history for the Retriever Courage Initiative. As you know, in response to student concerns last fall, an initiative on campus was developed. It ended up with the label of Retriever Courage, which came out of some language about having the courage to face some of the things that were embedded in institutions and to move through them together. We've been working with probably literally hundreds of people now across the campus, an outside consultant, a variety of different reports, faculty and staff and students. So you know that history, but if not, that's the brief recap. It culminated with a variety of reports that said much of what we needed to do was there, but it wasn't as well coordinated as it could be, and that there was one location where people could go, whether respondents, complainants, reporting parties, all of the different people that might need to use these services being in one place. So part of that recommendation was to centralize that. In addition to a lot of the training and other kind of things you've seen tonight, I want to talk a little bit about the holds and the trainings that may be coming forward. But probably most important, one of the highest level recommendations was that we needed a centralized office to do this. So we're delighted that that is happening. There are position descriptions out as we speak for beginning interviews and the selection process. But that will report as recommended in the report through the president's office, and it will reporting through Candace Dodson-Reed. And so she's here today to talk about that.
A little bit about the office. So thanks for having us and allowing us to talk about the office. As Dr. Young mentioned, there were 3 reports that were released in May, and one of the biggest recommendations, there were over 200 recommendations total, but one of the sort of prominent recommendations was that the Human Relations and Title IX offices moved from under the General Counsel's office to under the Chief of Staff, to the President's office under the Chief of Staff. And so we worked with a number of people over the summer to sort of figure out structure and what that would look like. And I'm delighted to say that we're doubling the number of people who were previously in those offices and calling it the Office of Equity and Inclusion. So in that office, we will have a Director of Equity and Inclusion, a Title IX coordinator, we will have 2 investigators, and we'll also have a case manager, training manager, who will help both the reporting and responding parties go through the process. And so the director position, Brenda might want to talk a little bit about that if you can, but the director position is the first position that we're putting in place. There is a search committee working with a search firm, looking nationally to find the best person on the planet. Were my sort of, was my thought, or my direction given to them, and to find that director and bring him or her on board first, and then we'll build out the rest of the office. But as Dr. Young said, the positions are written and we're ready to go. And you know, it was a difficult situation, but I am excited to see the level of support from students, faculty, and staff to help us get to the place where we are now and help us move forward. And so happy to answer any questions about the office or the. Sure.
What kind of campus stakeholders are involved in the search committee and then thus the subsequent interview process?
Sure. So on the search committee, it's a broad range of people, and so Brenda sits on there as SGA president. It's also the GSA president for the student voice piece. There are faculty members and staff members from departments across the campus, including gender and women's studies, the language literacy and culture doctoral program, and if you give me a second, I can pull up all the names. But it's a very broad range of stakeholders, faculty, staff, and students. Brenda, do you want to talk a little bit about? I know I don't know too much about it because I'm not in that initial search, and so I don't know if you wanted to talk a little bit about who's there and sort of what you've been working on. I've heard great feedback from, it's shared by Valerie Thomas, who's our chief HR officer, but certainly hearing great feedback about how that committee has come together to find, like I said, the best person on the planet to help the students work.
Yeah, so it's a lot of people, like you mentioned, from a lot of different departments. Like one of my bio professors actually sits on that committee, and so it's kind of cool. But we've been working on building up interview questions that would kind of get at the different situations that a person in that position might face. Like things like how have you worked with students, and if you've come into disagreements with students before, how do you navigate them? Kind of that sort of thing that's unique to campus, which is really cool. So last meeting, that's what we did, was we've been looking over individual candidates and looking at their responses to general questions of a position. And then we wrote interview questions or submitted them. And so we're going to be starting interviews next week, I think, or the week after, I don't remember.
Any other questions? Certainly if you have any other questions, again, it's Candace Dodson Reed. You can find me on email, and happy to answer questions or hear any feedback about what you all are thinking as we move forward.
And so one of the reasons I think this represents a transition point is that as we've been looking at the recommendations, what you're going to see over the next several months is that as we bring people on board, and we will continue working with all the constituents in our environment for the foreseeable future, if not forever, on continuing recommendations and how we work together. But if we are to really change culture, really put this and embed in the institution, Lynn Schaefer, me, and the other members of the implementation team have been working with all the different constituents to make recommendations. At some point, those recommendations have to be put in place in the administration. And so whether it's training, getting moved over to health services, whether it is creating an office where people will begin doing that work, we're in this slow transition period where the recommendations are they've been becoming reality all year, but are finding institutional homes. And we're trying to figure out if there will be an advisory board, what that will look like. And we don't know all that yet because we're still working with the different parties to figure that out. But it's the torch will get passed at some point from the implementation group working directly to the people that are charged with that work to taking it forward. Does that make sense? So one of those other pieces that will impact all of you, well, not all of you, because some of you have already done this. If you're a new student, you came in and you had to do an online course about consent and all the practices. You remember it, that's wonderful. So, and I know you remembered it with joy. So, the training committee, which was composed of faculty, staff, and students, made the recommendation that there be mandatory in-person training, if you remember. And while we did that for faculty, staff, and people that are in the role where they need to report and other things, that committee came back and said that they could not figure out how to get 15,000 people trained very quickly and in that period, so that for this year they were going to recommend requiring all students, including upper class students, to take that piece that typically is just for new students. So we have accepted that recommendation as the group, and we are moving forward with putting holds on first year transfers, new students, and graduate students who do not comply with that. It's a 20-minute before you get your registration, so it shouldn't be a lot of effort if people haven't done it. So it will have absolutely no impact on you whatsoever, because if you remembered it, you already did it. If you are a sophomore and you did it last year, you won't have to do it again. But if you didn't do it last year, we know who you are. And the committee has transferred that work back over to the people that implement that through the normal process. So they'll be reaching out to but we decided that since people didn't know about it, even though it was really important to students, faculty, and staff that this happened, we didn't want people's pre-registration this fall to get blocked before they knew what was going on. So we'll be rolling that out right after pre-registration, so that they'll have all the way until spring over Jan term to get that done. If you're a junior, you will have to get it done, but if you are a graduating senior, we figure at this point you get a pass, because by the time you get it done in March or April, you won't be here particularly long. Graduate students will need to take that. So we're going to ask for your help in supporting the recommendations of your fellow students who served on that training committee, that there should be some teeth in making people take it, or it isn't really important to have it up there, as we try to figure out how to get this to happen seamlessly, because you know what's been going on, but a lot of students have not been as involved. And so when they get this message that says you have to take this course, it's probably going to come as a surprise to them. So any help you can give us in navigating that, or letting people know why, and about how important it is as part of our culture in helping people to understand the concepts of consent and respect, and why it's important for everyone to know the legal as well as the care information will go a long way. So any questions about that?
Did you already say where the office is going to be held?
It will be on the 9th floor of the admin building.
For perhaps students, like incoming students who might not know much of like these transitions, what would you say is the most important thing that incoming students should know about this Office of Diversity? I'm sorry, equity.
That's a great question. Yeah, you start to answer.
So I can't answer about the department, because that's going to be under her leadership and expertise, and I can tell you in working with her, we are very lucky that's where it is. I believe it'll be good. What I would say is our biggest concern, and there's many big concerns, but one of the large concerns is that through a year of where we were last year, that people will not feel comfortable using that. I can tell you from where we are last year, this office is coming forward, but we've also put things in place with turnaround, with additional counseling support, in a number of ways that what we heard is that our process was following all the legal requirements, but that students didn't feel cared for. And so for me, what I would want students to hear, regardless of the issue they're coming in, is that we heard you, and that we are working really hard to make this a place that students will feel comfortable coming and that will use. And that we want to hear you, and it's important that when you need help, you get it. And we hope that you will know that there are people that have worked really hard for a year to regain trust, and it's only by using it that you'll get to find out that that's true.
I would say 2 things. One is a personal thing. I'm the parent of a sophomore, and so a sophomore in college who I dropped off on a college campus, and I said this at the event, public event that we had. And so I want the same level of care for her on her college campus that I want every UMBC student to have. And so I'm leading from that lens, and I think that's sort of an interesting perspective that I have as a parent and as a leader in this role. And the second thing I'd say is that we try really hard to get the word out, and sometimes it doesn't work And so, so we can send out lots of campus announcements about the new office. We could send it out on My UMBC, and we could do things like this. But I think it's really important for students to tell other students about this office, about the work that we're doing, and about the kind of culture that we're trying to create here, or continue to create here at UMBC. And I think it's a really important role for you all as leaders in on the campus to help elevate that.
And the final word I'll say, and this is not retriever courage, I think we also heard the things that weren't said. And this is an office of equity and inclusion, not solely a Title IX office. Because I think as we've been listening to students, there were many voices that were raised about Title IX. But there are other forms of equity and inclusion or things that interrupt our progress to degree or other, that we're thinking about. And so when we put on additional support services in the Women's Center, which we did for the care and support, we put additional services in the Mosaic Center. We know that we are going through some pretty tumultuous times, regardless of where you fall on the continuum of politics. And we want to make sure that all of our students, regardless of what it is that may be troubling you or causing you stress, have the opportunity to come into this office and to take what we've learned about Title IX and to transfer that learning to all of our areas of equity and inclusion. And so for me, it's really important that people know that we've heard what was said, but we've also heard sometimes what wasn't exactly said and how we might expand those lessons of some really hard this year work to everybody. Some of you know, my niece goes here too, so I don't even have to think about what I want at another school. I know what I want for all of you, and so I think we're all kind of saying the same thing. We also now have a ton of other stuff on your agenda, so I think the last thing we'll say is we are always here for answers and questions. You can also communicate with us directly or through Brenda Francis, or pop into our own offices to ask us if you think of something later or shoot us an email. Come on.
Sorry, just to be mindful of the time, would you guys want to continue this discussion? Just because we're working on this schedule. This is a question that you can ask now or can contact them later.
Sure. I believe we could add 2 minutes maybe to the agenda.
All those in favor? Alright, go ahead.
So my question was, would there be any students working in the office? Because I know, like a student liaison, I know that students still, some students still work on with students, their fellow students about problems that are maybe like intimate or,
Sure. Sensitive.
Yeah, sensitive.
Sure.
So, but then I also heard you say that you had programs in Wednesday and
Women's Center.
in the Women's Center. So I thought is the Women's Center, SGA, and Mosaic, are we gonna be like the extension of your office? Or is it gonna be a student care?
So one of the things that I'm working on now is figuring out what the advisory board, for lack of a term, I think I'm gonna call it the Inclusion Council, what that looks like, and that will for sure have student voice. And so those will be the folks from across the campus, students, faculty, and staff, who will be playing an advisory role to the director and to the office. So yes, for sure, having student voice there. I've not thought about having students work in the office, but that's certainly something I can explore. But certainly having that inclusion council that is made up of faculty, staff, and students.
So there's a two-edged sword, right? And some of the original work that came out of all the national work that's been done on this is that we will continue to have peer mentors and peer groups. So we've got an interpersonal violence peer group. There are peers in the Women's Center. There's peers in Res Life, RAs, and others that will continue to get trained and do this work and support. One of the recommendations about taking it out of student conduct areas and putting it into an office was also many students saying that when students were involved on a campus where everybody tends to know each other's business, particularly if you live on campus, and is that sometimes it felt really uncomfortable. As much as I want to talk to my peers, sometimes when I'm coming in to talk about something that feels very vulnerable, I don't want people to even know I've been in that office, and people's fear about that. So we're always trying to balance that, and that's where we'll look to all of you for the best way to do that, and that's, I think, why this board that Candace is talking about is so important to continue. but that's what's coming up, and I did want you just to hear what's coming up and has come up in discussions about that, has kept some students coming forward sometimes, because they're afraid other students might know them or recognize them and share. So it's hard because it works both ways, right? You want to talk to somebody, but you also may be fearful. Okay, we're out of here, we have to ask you another 2 minutes.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
So you're allowed to talk.
Close this and we can.
Thank you.
You're the next guest speaker. Can we make motions?
It's official.
Alright, so now we're gonna move on to the jail. Is the amendment to the SGA budget policy.
Yep.
So, do you mind going through this a bit?
Yeah, of course. So this is JL 03-1920. Actually, I'm going to propose another amendment to it because we found it while we were looking through. But last year we decided that originally the treasurer had the power of reallocation request. So if the finance board delegated money to the organization, but the organization realized that they wanted to shift some of those numbers around, the treasurer had that sole power to do so. But this year we decided to put that power back in the hands of the finance board because it kind of felt like a weird check that the finance board could be a voting body with members that were elected who decide what this is, and then the treasurer would come in and basically change everything if they wanted to. So we agreed to put that power back into the hands of the finance board. We're just updating the budgetary policy to say so. But it's in budgetary policy and not or budgetary statutes and not budgetary policy. Like we require 2/5 votes, so that has to agree as well. But these are the changes that were basically made for the process, which would be now the chair and the liaison for the organization have to sign off on any reallocation forms, and if there's a dispute between that, like the chair doesn't think it should be signed but the liaison does, or the chair thinks it should be signed but the liaison doesn't, then the issue would go to the full finance board for a vote. And whatever the board votes is final, it can't be overruled. This is the proposed change because in Article 13, for the possible vacancy of the treasurer, there's just a line there saying like, hey, if the treasurer's not there, then the finance board chair will assume the power of reallocations, but we're just striking that entire thing because it won't matter since the power of reallocations is already within the hands of the finance board.
And what was the amendment that you said?
That's that section right there for the at. And then at the top, it's at Article 13. It should be in green, but it might be.
Does anyone have any questions? No questions, is there a motion? Yes, thank you, sorry.
Can you scroll down? Not to the left. To the vote. So this has already been voted on at the finance board, correct?
Yes. So I'm
With the
proposing
amendment or without the?
without the amendment. It was a situation that Scott brought to my attention on Thursday. So
Yeah,
my
so
goal
that-
was to have it amended in this and then re-voted on the finance board tomorrow.
I didn't think you could do that. I think they voted on legislation.
I think with jails, if one
So we should
party
check that. We
Can
should check that.
you bring it in as a new JL, like the next number, where we could say this is dead on the floor, and then it's reintroduced as a new JL, in which case we vote on it here, and then they vote on it?
Yes, we could do that.
because from what I was aware, if there was disputes between the two documents that occurred, then the board would go back to the same mediation process in the House. So, like the finance board made something, or in this case, like the Senate made something, and the finance board made changes to it, that would go back to the Senate.
But the finance, the finance, the Senate is. It's not like.
Oh, yeah, all right.
So, I would say maybe, it's the same thing, but it's in essence the same thing, but I think procedurally it's cleaner
Yeah, to do
to
this way.
introduce new legislation to the Senate and then
We already have.
So would I have to make it JL 04? Or actually?
Yeah, we'll just push.
Yeah, it's already a JL 04.
So, and
Make
then
it
there's a file.
JL 07.
If it's introduced before the other ones, so it would still be 4.
Well, these have already been introduced because they've been approved on the agenda.
Yeah, you guys approved the agenda, so they have this section. So the jail 07.
Then you just want to clear out those.
Switch to date of introduction to the 21st. Sorry about this, guys. We thought we had everything, but Scott's like he didn't have everything.
Sorry?
So, you are you gonna like tell me to do the amendments?
Yeah, I can. Well, the quick change is already on there.
It's already on there.
I wrote it in suggested.
Oh.
So you can add it. It's 2 sections, one's having a part one, So now. Or post way, you have to do it. Because I can't. It's jail.
Alright, okay guys, we're gonna go into our new legislation, NL 07-1920, amendment to the SGA website policy.
Motion.
First, I move to suspend procedural rules to allow Zero to vote. As he came in after reading. Second.
Have to vote.
Wait, who seconded it? Okay, all those in favor?
So where's the procedural rules?
And it passes. Yay.
Second, I would like to introduce JL 07-1920.
Okay.
So this is, if you don't mind if I can talk about it. This is JL 07, it's basically what I just showed you, but we changed it so it's all properly procedural now. But yeah, just again, simply all powers of reallocation are within the finance board now the treasurer stands to keep things democratic as we love democracy.
So are there any questions on changes to this joint legislation? No? Is there a motion?
I move to approve JL 07-1920.
Second.
All those in favor? Oh, and the motion passes.
Thank you guys. Sorry that it's just getting
Uh, is where-
We do, yeah.
Okay, so now we're gonna get into our confirmation. First confirmation is JL 04-1920 confirmation of Sharon Marsa as the member of the appeals board. So, welcome, Sharon. Hi. Alright, so Linda, if you could just explain a bit about position before we get into it.
Yes, so appeals board is one of the judicial bodies that we have in SGA, the other one is election board. And so SGA is responsible for nominating 2 people to serve kind of on our behalf, but not really. on appeals board, and the other 3 people on appeals board come from student conduct and community standards, and they go through their own kind of peer judicial stuff, and they do peer judicial stuff in their spare time, and that's what they do. And so they have a majority vote on appeals board, but we get to nominate 2 of our people as well. So appeals board only convenes under 3 circumstances. The first is if the election board makes a disqualification or some sort of penalty against a candidate and that candidate wants to appeal that, they would go to the appeals board. If the stipend review committee makes a decision to cut somebody's stipend and they want to appeal that, they would also go to the appeals board. And if a member of SGA accuses another member of SGA of violating the guiding documents, then the appeals board serves as the body that interprets the guiding documents and figures out if something actually happened or it didn't. And so Sharon was chosen by the nominating committee unanimously to serve in this position.
I was gonna ask, how are accusations of guiding doc violations different than impeachment?
Because you wouldn't necessarily, I guess, want to impeach somebody, but you want there to be some sort of other
Censure.
Yeah, yeah. I don't, under my knowledge, it has never happened before, but that mechanism is there.
They also can, the appeals board convenes if someone is found to be ineligible for some reason, some of their position, and if the person wants to appeal that ineligibility. So like, they were found ineligible because of a behavior thing, and they want to appeal that, or because of a grade thing, and they want to appeal that. So.
Or you could appeal GPA too.
I mean, you
You
could
could appeal it, but you
dry.
don't have too much of it.
It's pretty cut and dry, but there, I mean, there could be a reason that, like, maybe your grade is getting changed.
It's an incomplete.
Or it's an incomplete, like, there could be a whole, who knows, but who knows what the reason could be, but the mechanism is there.
Any other questions? Thank you, Brenda. So Sharon, can you just take a moment to introduce yourself, any background you've had in our campus, or just your interest in being a member of the appeals board or SGA in general?
Hi everyone, I'm a senior here. I'm a bio major pre-med. So Brenda reached out to me about being on appeals board, and I think like this kind of position is really important. I know some of you guys from beforehand, but I wouldn't use any biases if like any of these situations would come up. And I think this, I'd be honored to do this kind of thing. I've taken some leadership roles in other clubs on campus and in a medical fraternity. So in that, we all have leadership positions. My shots in that too. Yeah. And I started a club on campus, so I know the importance of communication within a team or a group of people. So yeah.
Any questions for Sharon?
I have one for Brenda. What did you see in here that made you, I guess, vote for her, and what did evidence that you could bring that in here, what was in there?
Yeah, great question. So when looking for an appeals board member, what I was looking for, and I nominated Sharon, is someone who is super involved on campus, and kind of had the experience of being in leadership positions and knew that sort of like guiding document rhetoric, if that makes sense, like you're familiar with that language, but at the same time, someone who has not been working really closely with SGA specifically and doesn't have major conflicts with current SGA officers, and Sharon came to mind as one of those people. So that was my criteria.
I just want to know, I know Sharon, I know she's really, really determined, and she's a hard worker as well, and I think she would be a great for this position.
What?
I move to approve 04-1920.
Second. All those in favor? Abstaining, not present, two not present, and it passes. We're all set. Statement is due tomorrow.
You're all set.
I don't really get any moments.
Thank you.
Goodbye, thank you.
I have no moments.
They don't get like 1,000.
They are still sworn in, but it's been.
Too close.
I apologize.
After you close it, I decided I would. I wanted to get, like, I didn't have the right to appeal. I wanted to go.
You have to register to abstain before the meeting starts. So if you don't want to approve, then automatically disappears.
Alright, so now we're gonna get into our initiative updates. Our early feedback. Right, so would anyone like to start on initiative updates?
I have like a quick little thing.
Yes.
So on Thursday at I think 11 a.m. I'm having a meeting with the SDS manager and a couple people, I think 2 people from facilities management regarding accessibility concerns and just like project ideas if anybody wants to join.
You say 11 a.m.
You know, I'm not positive, but I believe it is 11 a.m. This Thursday.
I have the last time. Also, did everyone get my emails about my GCon notifications?
Yes.
I was gonna talk to you because I didn't send one to you, but
Oh,
because when I looked at your account, I couldn't find it. I just don't know your availability.
I don't use that.
why not?
See, I didn't know. Why not?
Those are the type of stuff.
Yeah.
That's extra
So
work.
I'm trying to set up a one-on-one with you, but I couldn't tell based on your detail. But I'll talk to you after,
What's it about?
just to catch up on your initiative. Your
Oh.
on Sunday.
Hey, Brenda, that's you.
That's me.
This fun. Oh.
Anyway, so
Oh, really?
this isn't necessarily one of my initiatives per se, but when I ran, I wanted to focus on transparency as a big one. So with some conversation with Brenda, I've gone ahead and added a stipend section to our transparency tab, and what that means is that all of our stipends they have some context, like it's the hours per week with credit, and then I mentioned the stipend review committee, and then I just go on ahead and detail all our stipends, the number of positions per stipend, and then I also include the SGA stipend peer comparisons that Candace and Brenda did over the summer, just so that we can be more transparent and open, so people can kind of understand how much we're getting paid and hold us accountable in the appropriate manner.
Yes,
Can you talk about the peer comparisons a little bit more? Because I had someone come to me today, it's like, the president has free room. I'm like,
That is correct.
really?
Not our president,
Not our
but the
president, not our president.
the buoy president, yes.
Oh, yeah, according to the document I found.
Yeah, the buoy. So like if you see Coffin,
Oh, I see. Oh,
They
I
get-
see that. Okay. I did not see that. Oh, I see. It's on the bottom. I didn't see that.
indeed. So
Okay.
if you need, I can update the website and add a little bit more context. Be like, this is definitely not us. Like, please know that's not us.
Is there a way to make those numbers right? Just but
Yes, and then
can I add a recommendation?
Yes.
Can you make the bottom portion where it says buoy Coffin like bigger? Because I didn't notice that when I was looking.
No, I cannot because that is Google Doc.
Really?
It's just yeah. It's just,
sorry, go ahead.
Get this
John.
message out.
I was just gonna
they're ambassadors for the university. You'll find roles like that at HBCUs often. But Mr. and Ms. Coffin, and I want to say there's another school that has something like that.
UMES probably.
UMES has Mr. UMES and Miss UMES. HR is also one of those positions that tend to be ambassador positions. They go out and experiences. They very much are like brand ambassadors for the SGA and the university. So.
Yeah, and I'm open.
And they have initiatives.
I'm open to design, critique, and if anyone else wants to see other transparency issues though.
I think we talked about this a little bit a couple days ago. Was there any way to like change the way this looks? Because like the table, for example, it just bothers me. Like numbers.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. The only problem is that WordPress like doesn't really support tables natively. I had to like copy and paste a table, and then it was just a whole mess. And I could, with some fiddling, I could get it to a decent degree. But what I was thinking about is maybe doing a Google Sheet as well, just because it would be easier to adjust for tuition later. So all that work for nothing. So. But it's all right. It's all right. And then I guess Josue, Kai, if there's no other initiatives that want to talk to Kai, Josue, Boomy, and I, we were down at University of New Mexico, and Boomy wasn't present in this conversation, but we talked to the associated students of University of New Mexico, which is like their SGA.
Before you I have one thing to ask you, a question to ask, I think ask them. So everyone knows about the general body meeting that's happening on November 15th, right?
Yes, we all know.
Yeah, well, you know. So basically what's happening there is what, so I was talking to Dee about this, and we were wondering if you guys would like to take one Senate meeting, also Rashad was there, take one Senate meeting to work on your presentation / posters for the meeting, or would you like to do that on your own time?
On my own time.
On your own time?
I'll just do it.
So raise your hand if you'd like to do it here. Well, it seems like we're doing it here.
Do you have to?
Well, it's gonna be like
Well, it is during a Senate meeting, so it's mandatory.
There is the other, are we?
Also, is it the November 4th thing that you read to us? Okay, so about that, sorry, Terry, this is about the GBM.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Oh, I just had a question. What time is it at? I just want to ask it.
It is,
6 to 8.
yes.
Wait, one question. So,
November
is
13th.
it like a physical poster?
Yeah, so it's gonna be down on Main Street, and it's gonna be like one
So
of those
I
galleries.
just understand like you want me to bring all the stuff from the news to create the poster and just.
So
They would bring us.
B is gonna provide all the stuff so everything's gonna be here set, we're just gonna take the time to work on your initiative presentation.
So basically, it's going to be trifolds that you have to like make.
So she's bringing the
She's
trifold.
making the
So everything will
trifolds
be
with
set.
pictures and all that.
I think what the mentality was that because everyone's really busy, that is Senate work. And now this is the place to do Senate work, so it makes sense to do it here. But if, like, why do you,
we can print and everything here.
yeah, so it would be just a Senate meeting allocated for working on our stuff for the GBM. That's my
I
job.
don't know if they, but one of you guys has done about this, I can talk about it.
Can we just talk about the November 4th thing and then interrupt it? So that is the grand opening of Oka Boca, and it's during the time of Senate, and I know a lot of you guys would be RSVP to go. So what I was talking to Brenda about, and also Candace and maybe B, was we could maybe like live stream that grand opening instead of us going to Senate, but also what are your thoughts, because we're gonna be missing like technically Senate work, like when do you think you should?
Just an idea, but what about the Senate field trip to Oklahoma?
For the
For the grand opening.
Yeah, that's what I was saying, like,
Yeah.
that's what we'd all want to be like you were saying for YouTube channel, like maybe make that like a segment. Let's doing that, if you want to, just live stream in general. Yeah.
How would we live stream it? Like, we just bring camera videos?
Well, no, there's no, you can do it on your phone.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Or did you want us to bring that whole thing?
No, that's what I was like. I can't hear all that down here.
Do you have something to say?
Is that?
It's because since we're updates and, I mean, it's not, I personally don't think it's like that big of a deal, cause it kind of is, we're going on behalf of like the school, but what are you guys' thoughts on us not having like a real Senate meeting? Yes.
I was gonna ask, was that the same day as
It is also the same day as our things, and we had talked to
the
David.
theater room?
Yeah.
Is there an easy way for people to get down there?
We can drive.
Maybe we can just carpool.
Yeah.
Or we can
I
try
have a car.
transit route, see how that works.
Or we can take the UMBC bus, and see what it's doing.
Huh?
There may or may not be a shuttle.
Then they-
I will follow up on that.
Alright. Well, who has a car? Okay.
No.
Well, this seems like we have enough cars. So, I think, so basically, are you guys okay with us not having a meeting and us going down instead?
We,
Great. Yes, Jose.
let's see. Yeah, I'm down.
Oh, we speak French?
We,
Sorry.
Do I have to attend that as well?
Yes, because we're doing it instead of the Senate.
why are you trying to skip the night?
You don't want to be there.
I don't have to waste gas on it, so
You just carpool
And you
some.
can carpool.
I have to get here.
We both live in Zurich.
I'm not gonna start.
Oh, you come from Baltimore, right?
It takes me about an hour and 30 minutes. Moving on.
I can talk to you after and then see if we can work something out. Because if it's, I don't want it to be like something that's extra, you know. Yes, for shot.
Update. I shot the footage for my first vlog today. I'm probably gonna get that done hopefully by this Friday and be ready for it to be on the YouTube channel. Also, I scheduled a semester worth of vlogs to happen. If I already hit you up and we already scheduled something, I'll schedule it this way. But yeah.
Where did you go in your first walk?
So we walked around Arbutus, we drove around Hilltop Circle, talked about UMBC a little bit, and engagement, and then we also went to Pizza 76, did a little bit of review, ate some food,
What deal?
got $5.50 for a burger, big fries, and
That
So
sounds
good.
good.
a soda.
Yes,
Yeah.
We vlogged in New Mexico, do you want that for the conference?
So I don't see how that would fit into me trying to bring the student vlog out to Arbutus.
No, it talks about like,
That's over.
It's a question, it's a vlog, right?
No, just saying, I wasn't even trying to be rude, I'm just saying like, I don't see how that aligns with the initiative, but if you really want it, I can. Sure, send the footage. Yes.
Is there any chance you could get your vlogs like playing on the TVs and comments?
There's no sound of it.
Oh.
There's no sound in those.
Hi, Liam. Thank you for coming back.
But if you guys are down, each vlog is gonna be 10 minutes or less, and they're gonna be weekly, we could watch one during the Senate meetings. If you guys want to see the gist of how they are. Yeah,
I love that.
sure.
That's the question. So, did you already post the first one? Or
No, I
you-
just shot the footage
Oh,
today,
okay.
so I'll have to go edit it, add music, add sounds, work with Shish Botany, try to get some of that stuff done.
That's-
So will you be posting it every Monday then, like the following Monday after you shoot the one, or like what's the release
So
schedule?
I'm gonna shoot it every week. I'm gonna shoot the footage every week, and then it just depends on when I'm gonna be done editing it. As soon as I'm done, I'm gonna give it to DipCom for them to like put it up to YouTube, and hopefully if Collier emails me back after the 7th time I emailed him, then it'll also go on my units.
How does he manages
What's his email?
You might, what is the name?
the ads?
Wait, what's his email?
He did UMBC,
The front page ads.
to get on
On
my
my
UMBC.
UMBC?
No, it's common.
Calder.
But yeah, any questions?
What's his email?
I'll give you the email.
If you make it an event, you can promote it, and then it can rotate through that.
The event hasn't happened.
Great, thanks, Michelle. I'm excited to watch the videos. Anyone else have any other initiative updates? So our next confirmation is coming until 6:50, so we could move
read through it really fast. So they said outlets near empty seating, outlets in the commons don't work. There's not enough streetlights. There should be cameras in the parking garages. There's mold in sometimes second and third floor. People smoking when they shouldn't be, which isn't really an us thing, but I wrote it down anyway. Parking. Someone said that we should have a second involvement fest each semester.
We do that.
You mean, so 4 involvement fests, not 2.
Correct. Like per year.
Send it to me.
Someone said the library is gross. Again,
The library's what?
gross. More food options, better outreach for weekend programs, which is doable. More seating places and better Wi-Fi, which, yeah.
It's in the works.
Aaron, do you mind showing off me? I'll make a folder and put it in December folder. Yes.
Taryn, may I ask, how did you get so many students to talk to? Rashad, how did you get so many students to talk to you?
We just get them in a corner, like.
Oh, okay, so.
That's literally like, okay, so the people I asked already knew. I was like, hey, I know you, come here, get some free stuff, but first answer these questions. What change you want to see on this campus? If you had unlimited amount of money to make any change on this campus, what would it be? These are responses that we received.
So for them to get all the like stickers and everything, we made them do that.
I have an idea. What if you did that? You could ask people that, but also what if you had like a giant whiteboard with that?
I wanted to do that.
And then people could write, and it's whiteboard, so that in case people write things that are appropriate, you can erase it. Hey, I wasn't on it. But that's excellent. I think that posing that question like that. If you have unlimited resources, what would you change? I think that's a great way to pose that question.
We don't have limited resources.
It doesn't matter. But what if we did?
We can't, I was gonna ask you this, I don't even know, cues, but if we wanted to buy stuff for the table, would we have to take it out of like the, I think I already asked you.
It comes out of the
Initiative fund, okay.
For office hours?
They wanna buy like,
We wanna buy
Would it
stuff
be
to make the
programming?
table more.
or programming, but they don't need legislation for that, right?
Just a red
I have an announcement about that.
Yes.
Oh, should I make it now?
Yes.
I'll be excellent.
Are we done with Star things?
I have a question.
Yes.
So I said this last week, and I was just wondering. I don't know if this is a place to say it or not, but like so many students ask about parking, and I know there's a parking advisory committee. Who's on it?
At this moment, Hidayah and Liam both went to it. Hidayah isn't here. Liam was gonna share her comments.
Yeah. So one of the main, from the many officers that we have, the main recurring topic that everyone has an issue with is parking, not enough parking for people. So I think it doesn't matter if it's $1 million problem. We need to fix that. Who do I talk to about that to get that? Because I feel like there is enough support to make it happen, and I think it's time to make it happen. I don't think it's okay to just keep brushing it off because, oh yeah, that's an expensive problem, so we're not going to do that. I think if we're allocating $23 million to building a new building, we can allocate at least $2 million to get a new garage somewhere around. Yes.
I mean, a counterpoint to that is I've heard commuters say the exact opposite thing, saying that there's no parking issue, it's just you may have to walk, and that may not be feasible for everyone, but it's like, yes, it is a problem, but it could be just a vocal majority and not everyone.
I think at least getting a space for freshmen on this campus is a huge move, and I don't know what I have to go through. I don't care what hoops I have to jump. I'm going to make that happen.
And I know Lee was talking about that they were going to make it so not everyone got parking passes next year, that they would, for anyone, so that they would remove that money from the transportation fee, and then people, if they wanted one, would have to pay.
Honestly, I don't mind paying $10.
Well, either way, like you would pay so people who don't use a car would not be paying the fee, and people who would be getting a permit would be paying the same amount. So really, it doesn't affect anyone. They'd be kind of losing revenue, in my opinion. But it would make sure that having the car is not the default. And that's not a silver bullet solution, but it is a step in the right direction in my opinion. But of course, I'm just one person.
Yes.
Our something character.
I was gonna add that at the very minimum, we need more accessible parking. Like, that's an issue, even if, oh, we have parking on the moon, like, I'm not walking from the moon, or those with disabilities are not gonna walk, or can't walk from the moon all the way down to the moon.
I just, sorry.
So, one thing you should know is that there is plans for a new parking garage in the coming future. If you ever look at the master plan. But the thing is, right now I'm looking for the timeline, but I don't see the timeline yet as for when that's supposed to happen. But there is a proposed new east parking garage right across from the stadium lot. Like, you know that road that goes like down, like when you go down Center Road and you go straight, near that road, they're gonna put one on just the other side there. I think right now it is a lot, actually.
East, so, you know, east parking garage and west parking garage.
Yeah, and there's a west parking garage.
Yeah, 1,500 spaces, and west parking garage, 1,000 spaces.
Do you know what the prospective timeline of that is?
That's
And that's 8 years.
But also, one thing you might want to talk about is, well, here's one thing: can students already park in the stadium lot?
Commuter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Commuters can. Okay, so it's just like there's just not a lot of parking on campus. Okay.
I just, sorry, can I make a small comment? I just find it absurd that a freshman student has to take a shuttle to a lot off campus, about 2 miles away, just to park their car and back. And that shuttle is not as accessible as people make it seem like it is. It might exist, but it's a hassle. It really is a hassle.
So, a couple things. I think this is a great example of what can we do in our time, right? And so, the parking garage is in the master plan, more parking lots are in the master plan, so they're in the works. And it's frustrating to be like, okay, but they're in the works for 10 years from now. But again, that's how bureaucracy moves. And so, I think we can ask questions about like, well, it's dangerous for freshmen to be going out to that lot by themselves and they have to walk sometimes. So what can we do about that? And there's not enough accessible parking spaces. So what can we do about that? Those are like, I would think more about implementable solutions instead of kind of brute forcing the problem, if that makes sense. And I also want to point out a comment that you made about the building and about us being informed about the talking points that we're using is really important. And so people bring up the building a lot, but that was state money, and the money that would be used for any parking lots or parking garages would be coming out of UMBC's budget. And so it's really important to make those distinctions because when you say things that are kind of slightly untrue, it distracts from the actual problem.
Where can we get the money to get the parking?
It would come out of like, the parking, like facilities management UMBC budget. But like the building was paid for entirely by the state. It wasn't UMBC abandoning parking to pay for something else, if that makes sense. So like those distinctions are important, especially if you want to actually implement something like that, that you're not, perpetuating stuff.
Misinformation.
Yeah.
Stuff. Hi.
I remember having like a presenter from Transit coming last year to talk about this parking thing. And I remember him explaining like for flat surface, like an individual space being like 13,000, and that's just for flat surface. For an actual parking garage, just an individual space. And the new building is an institutional building, so that's why it was funded by the state. That's another reason why.
And when we're talking about new building, which one are we talking about?
ILSP.
ILSP.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why it was funded by the
But
state.
that's not what you were talking
No,
about.
I'm talking about the
Student
counseling.
That's a fee building. That's a fee.
I know you're talking about the
No, I'm talking about the one that they
Okay.
pushed within 2
I thought
years.
he said he was pushing the regions to let him do the student services.
Yes, they have to approve it, but that doesn't mean they give you funding for it. Like the state has to say, yes, you can build this, and yes, you can do this, and we can charge students funding. So that's gonna be a fee, my understanding is a fee building, right? A fee funded building?
I think it's partially.
Partially.
Yeah.
Where's that?
So it's half state, half bus.
I don't know.
But
I'm not 100% sure.
Hmm.
I can double check.
So the question you wanna, try to answer is, like, something short term to between, less than, like, something short term, so that way when this thing gets built, like, continues from that, or something to put it, to implement between then, or?
so the point is that building is being built in 2 years, right? The plan is to have it done by spring of 2020 or summer of 2020. That whole building, right? And I just think it's absurd that we're waiting 10 years to have a flat spot, just a cemented, big area for parking. That's just my opinion. But I think a lot of people have been struggling with parking for a while at UMBC, and I just don't know why those voices aren't being heard. With 60% of the school being commuters and needing parking every day.
Thing is, I've also heard similar things too. It's like we have parking, it's just the distance.
Mm.
But I also I really emphasize with this that like maybe we should start reconfiguring our questions to be more feasible. Like I understand like this is a serious problem. I hate the fact that I have to sometimes I just don't find parking or I just have to walk so far. But it's also just I think the small steps might enact bigger change. I don't know if you know what I'm saying, but go ahead please.
And also to play devil's advocate, most campuses don't even allow freshmen to have parking, period. And while it's like, I don't want to say, oh, be thankful for what we have, but like, I don't know if that should, I don't know how I want to phrase this. So, and I don't want to marginalize any of those concerns. Just keep that in mind.
More questions, comments? Is it just you and this way for offsides now? Is this way offsides now? And
He died.
oh, he died.
And
Oh, by the way, Pioneer's when he died, she has a CWIT thing, so she couldn't be here today. It's mandatory for her program. Yes.
Oh, I have a question. How do I go about rescheduling? Like, it's like
Rescheduling.
my offsides. I know I can do the
So basically, like, if you look at the calendar of when the office hours are, you can just pick a day that you can, so it doesn't have to be like concrete, you just pick a day that you can go to. Yes.
Do you think it would be beneficial to add people's names to the office hour calendar as well?
See, I was thinking that because, like, even for me personally, sometimes I have something at that time that I can't go to my, like, specific office hour.
Mhm.
I have to go to a different one. So I don't know. Since we're out, the thing is, since we're out in the open, I don't think it mattered as much if our names were there because we would bring our nameplate and, like, our face would be there, and at least one of the sender is there. Not necessarily the name, but would you guys think it's a good idea to put your name as office hours?
Yes.
Yes. So for example, like if you change your office hours, would you just adjust the name? Because like, what if you're just changing it once? That's the thing.
You can just hit change ones.
Okay. Well, then we can just add everyone's names to like your office hours.
Yeah. So is the website just showing times office hours are being held, and it doesn't say?
It says time and place. I just put Main Street, right? Not Main Street, but resources.
Okay. Just made it straight. Alright.
We're just gonna SGA, go to about, no, never mind, go to leadership. Then
That's basically what it says. So you just add the name next to the person who's there. That sound good?
Just
Yes. Is that a yes? Okay.
Is name and position too much?
No, that's fine. We have 12 minutes to our next confirmation. Anyone have anything to share in general?
So very exciting news that I already shared on Slack a couple times, but I'll share it again. I'm very excited about it. Communications is up and running, so that's very exciting. So if you go to the SGA website and then under Executive and Department of Communications, the request form is up there. And so what you can ask from them is graphic design for your flyers or any pamphlets that you want to spread. If you want posts on social media, if you want a PR statement for whatever reason, they can do like recurring posts or one-time posts, my UMBC events, photography, like I'll let you read it, but there's a whole lot of stuff that they will do for your initiatives, which is very cool. I also want to ask them, I think they're going to start coming to Senate meetings and doing updates, which is exciting. If you want to get out information from your SGCs, that's a great way to do that as well. So that's communications, if the form is up. And then if you go to executive and then
I don't remember where to go.
executive SGA operations, our operations department of one person currently is up and running as well. And so she is here for all of your purchasing needs. So if you have any purchasing questions or you want to like make a purchase or buy anything, you can make an appointment with her or drop in during her office hours, and she will help you out with that. Yes.
You said for the would come in and like provide like updates about like what we're doing. Would that be just something that you can have like your secretary just like email them afterwards and just that way they don't have to like. I feel like cause like you obviously like see everything that Ryan talked about, but it should just be easy for them.
Yeah, I actually spoke to Michelle earlier in the office, and she was saying that the two people that she was thinking about sending to Senate meetings weren't available, so she was thinking about asking an FYA. So I was saying it would be useful since we have FYAs in the room to see if they can just keep track of some of the initiatives and then pass that information on to communications. I don't know how that would work, but that was just the conversation we had earlier.
Yeah, that's all good.
Yeah, that way we don't just add extra play to secretaries. But, yeah. All right, bye guys.
But that's that. Also, the rest of executive branch is also up and running. They all have their own initiatives that I won't get into, but they might be reaching out for collaboration purposes. They also might not, because they have some unique stuff from Senate. So if you hear from somebody that has a weird title, they're probably from the executive branch. And they will be reaching out, maybe.
Anyone else have any announcements? Oh, yes, Candace.
I once again sent out a reminder about the Haven. If you're able to go to the opening of the Haven, that is on this Thursday. It's over a course of 4 hours, but the ribbon cutting is at 1:30. So if you can do that, that would be great.
Where is it?
It's 35 Mellor Avenue. So like that way. No, wait, I don't know.
There is a shuttle.
Very close. Yes,
I will be taking a shuttle if anyone wants to see.
Thank you, Candace. Caleb?
Hi, that's me. Hello, my name is Caleb Cagle. I'm the new SGA lecturer of the election board. Nice to meet you all.
Hello.
Hi. Right, so Brenda, do you mind sharing about this?
Sure. So the election board is the other judicial body in SGA, and they're responsible for administering and planning the SGA elections in April. And they also mediate disputes between candidates and between candidates and the rules and all that stuff. And so the election board chair obviously heads up that operation and meets with Candace and me regularly, and then eventually the election board to plan that stuff. And so the election board chair will become part of nominating committee, which has representatives from Senate, Finance Board, and the executive branch, which is me. And so all of us together will be choosing the election board members. And so, yeah. Oh, nominating committee approved Caleb unanimously.
So Caleb, I know you already introduced yourself, thank you. Do you mind sharing a bit about your experience? Well, not in a position like this, but just like, well, let me rephrase that. Do you mind sharing a bit about yourself and your interests in SGA?
Sure. I'm a junior at UMBC. My first 2 years were spent commuting, and then the rest has been on campus. As I switched slowly from commuting into on-campus stuff, it was mainly because I needed to be closer to all the different things I was involved in. One of them being Project Canvas, which was through the leadership peer facilitator position, which then I was recommended by Candace to run for this with one of my other fellow peers. And due to that, I mainly just wanted to become more involved in all the different affairs that is UMBC and how it kind of runs and operates in the day-to-day functions that a lot of people aren't quite aware of. As many of you might have known, when you first came here, you probably didn't know a whole lot about SGA or really what it does. And so I'd really like to change that moving forward. But most of my stuff has come from a lot of different leadership workshops and student involvement things myself, because I'm a big loser. I have a lot of time on my hands. So I say that, but I'm like a spread a little bit thin. But at the same time, I get really involved in a lot of things. I like to go out to events and get my hands dirty myself. But at the same time, we need to start facilitating and handing out these roles a little bit better in that aspect, and having a little bit of accountability in that realm. So I'm looking forward to it. It'll be my first time doing it, so fingers crossed that it goes all well.
Thank you. Anyone have any questions for Caleb? Kai, and then
I just had a quick general question. Like, did you compare to finance board already?
Those will be going if Senate passes the jail tomorrow.
So as election board chair, you would be obviously in charge of the SGA election. So SGA voter turnout has historically been pretty poor, to say it very nicely. So what kind of tactics do you foresee yourself using in order to increase voter turnout?
Yeah, sure. We had a lot of great ideas that were kind of thrown around when we were determining who would be election chairman. But for the most part, one of the great ideas that actually the person that was running against me threw out was everyone likes some type of incentive, right? So he was saying when you go to a normal election, you get the I voted thing and you put it on you, and then everyone talks about the candidates, all that good stuff. So I would hope that we'd be able to somehow implement that. It's an easy, quick way. Everyone loves stickers. I see that on my website currently that have their things at the table. So I feel like that's an easy, quick, cheap incentive to do that, because the longer you buy in bulk, the better it is. A good fair point though that was brought up is to not go so deep into incentivizing it with peripheral and material things such as food, because then that detracts from the whole point of the election itself. But it's certainly an aspect that I'm open to talking about and open to considering. I myself am more so inclined to make it a little bit more well known in terms of advertising via the avenues that we have, and hopefully putting it in places that I wasn't aware specifically where the physical ones were put up last year. So I think that they probably didn't put it up in the best places, which needs to be, obviously Acro, Commons, not in the side by the bookstore, a little bit more where it's publicly seen. Maybe the information desk is better place. I don't really know if they can clear out some space over there, but that would be a better place than over by the bookstore, and obviously the food courts aren't an option. But that's just a couple of ideas that I've had mulling around my brain.
Where would this role fit on your priority list?
As of right now for the fall semester, from my understanding, it's not too intense, not too involved. So right now it's on the back burner. As we get closer to actually having a decent amount of candidates, then it's obviously going to take higher precedent. That being said, I mean, I do anticipate having a very busy spring semester, but my positions of accountability and responsibility always converge me because that's my name, and I hold my name very accountable. So when I hear somebody say my name, I want them to think of something that's good, something that's reputable, somebody that gets the job done, which is for the most part been what I've had in all my previous jobs.
How would you get people to, how would you make it more competitive for people to be more,
I'm sorry, what was the last?
how would you make it more competitive?
The elections itself?
Like, how would you get, recruit people, that's what I'm saying, to run for a position, yeah.
Gotcha. So I was currently a peer facilitator. So I have a lot of connections to lower underclassmen, I guess would be the correct terminology for that. And I think there needs to be a lot more incentive for them to feel like they should be inclined. I started that as early as when I was teaching them that there is a lot of things you can do on campus, and UMBC has a lot to offer you. You just have to be willing to stand up and take it for yourself. So as much as I can lead a horse to water, you can't force them to drink it. But I think that's part of the best thing to do is start to combat them early to show them like, if you get involved now, you can change a lot of the aspects that maybe you feel like there are gripes and grievances in now, because really it's all within your hands. They have to listen to you in some aspect or another.
Also, broadcast the stipends because they look a lot nicer.
Okay, sure. I wasn't aware that that university was stipend. So as much information as I can get, that would be great because I went in pretty blind. Not gonna lie about the whole SGA thing.
Do you know that you might also receive a stipend?
I do know about my stipend.
That part.
That part, yes. I'm not doing it for the money though. Yes.
What would you say is your biggest asset? Like, what would you bring to the role?
I'm really annoying. So I have no problem being the voice to reach out first and pester you consistently about something that you said that you do, and vice versa, because I like to hold myself accountable as well as others to that same degree. So I'd say that I guess my big strength to this whole position would be the fact that I have a lot of connections with faculty staff, which I think is something that has been a thing that so student government association, we're not targeting the fact that there's other people that can shoot these emails out, forward them out a little bit better than maybe perhaps students can. So I think that also is a strength.
I'm just asking a question.
Yeah, sure.
I would say if there's no more questions, I'd like to move to this.
I was like thinking, but I guess there's not time for that, so you can just move on.
No, there's time.
What leadership roles have you had at UMBC?
Peer facilitator for a year, leadership peer facilitator now. I work over at Parking Services. That I picked that up last semester. A lot of the stuff tends to be team lead stuff, but before I was prioritizing when I was commuting my job, my second job, which is off campus over by New York Airport. So a lot of the stuff that leadership is from is just coincidental, I'd say, for the most part.
So when you think of the question of the last one.
I guess I have a question about like conflicts, because as a chair, I'm assuming that there could be some kind of conflicts that you might have to face.
Possibly.
Can you tell me about a time that you've had to deal with a conflict when you being in a position of power, and tell me about how you handle that?
Yeah, so I mean, academic integrity is really important to UMBC in any institution, right? That's an academia. So, for example, if there was a problem with cheating, or maybe more specifically plagiarism. In the previous semester that I taught, me being in the role that I was in, I had to talk to them about it, and then we had to sit down and fill out paperwork about possibly having to, suspend, expel, whatever that ended up happening. Luckily, I managed to derail it in a sense of the fact that I didn't think that it was a big enough offense that they deserved to be expelled, but they, I think we managed to just I convinced them to do 0 on the assignment. So conflicts in general are bound to happen. It's human nature. I think a lot of value comes from conflict. It brings forth new issues, new horizons that maybe people didn't quite consider before. So I have no problem being in the middle of it and also diffusing it / initiating it if it needs to be done, if I feel that there is an actual issue with it.
Move to approve JL 05-1920.
Seconded.
All those in favor? 9-0. 2, and the motion passes.
Tomorrow, find his board.
You're being such a good interviewer.
Am I?
Yes. Yes. You're a great interviewer.
Yes.
Your questions are so good.
Are y'all leaving?
We have another engagement. Bye.
Nice to meet you all. My name is
What was
Asha.
your name? Yeah, nice to meet you guys.
My name is Asha Kem. Ajota Kem is my full name, but I go by Asha. I'm a bio major, pre-med, freshman.
And my name is Gloria O'Gordy. I'm also a bio major and a freshman.
Thank you for having us.
See you next week.
You will.
Yay.
Hi, are you Alex? No, you're not Alex. Come on.
Yeah.
Yes, as far as
Okay, but we have just a 5 to 12 minutes for each thing, and if it goes over, leading into the other person's time. Wait, 7 or let's just wait till 7.
she has class at 7. Oh,
She has class at 7.
no, her class ends at 7. That's what I meant to say.
Oh, so then you're. Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah. She'll be running over here. So
Oh, okay. All right. Fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't want to walk in here and start something else. Well, I'm going to send it. Now we're going to move on to SL 30-1920, confirmation of Juan Richardson as SORC administrator. Hey Zane, could you just talk a little bit about this position?
Yeah, so it's one of the new positions that I've added to the student organization support team. So last year, SGA and Campus Life signed a memorandum of understanding to create the Student Organization Resource Center, i.e. And so basically it contains materials, decorations, and other types of items that student orgs are able to rent out for their events or any kind of project that they're working on. Basically to kind of reduce the redundancy that we see in the finance board of requesting stuff that for example, string lights or something that multiple organizations want to use, but we usually don't purchase it because it's not a one-time event use, because it could be reused, and the source is a great way to store that and have student orgs be able to rent it out for events and stuff like that. So basically this position is basically helping me, because when sources open, we have appointment slots, but obviously I can't be there all the time, so Milan's just going to be basically helping me with that. Some other administrative things like keeping track of the items, making sure items are returned, helping student orgs rent things out,
and also helping me with like suggestion forms. So we're gonna add forms that allow orgs to suggest like items that they want to see in the source, and also some feedback stuff and things like that. So basically a lot of administrative tasks, so that we can stay organized with the space that we have. And sources is located in upper flats, behind the bar area currently. So.
Great, thanks, Dave. Someone want to just give a brief statement about who you are and any experience you've had in an administrative position or a position like this?
Yeah, of course. So hello everyone, my name is Luana Richardson. I am a sophomore. I'm majoring in bioinformatics and computational biology. And yes, so I have previous experience working as a desk staff for the Fine Arts Department. So working as a desk staff, we picked up phone calls, we assisted the people working at pretty much the Fine Arts office, filing reports, helping with the printer, just general stuff like that. And the reason why I want to join SGA, I read some of them. So simply stated, I want to be more involved in campus. However, I just don't want to just, join a club and be in and out of it. I want to be like, I want to be a part of an organization that is involved by assisting other students in their own creations and ideas. I want to be a part of that group that brings students' creations to life. SGA is heavily a part of that role. So SGA's mission, and I quote, is to organize undergrad students in creating a distinctive community, supports co-curricular and academic experiences, identifies and gives a voice to students' hopes and concerns, engages students in campus activities and decisions, and much more. What stands out to me is supporting co-curricular and academic experiences and giving a voice to students. I want to be a part of an organization that integrates the ideas of the students and the many students with different backgrounds.
I just wanted to commend you for coming in prepared. Your speech or introduction really reveals the passion behind what it is. Like, you took the time, you created those words, and you came up.
Thank you. Thank you.
Anyone have any questions from the line?
Move to the group this week.
Go for it.
The introduction is very thorough. I really like that. It's pretty.
We're honored to have you here. Something that I move to approve. I can't see that part.
It's 30.
30.
SL 30.
Move to approve SL 30-1920.
Second.
All those in favor? 9-0-0-2. And the motion passes. If you could just come over here with me 1 second. Sorry. One, just come from your feet and then just say the oath. Just face me and raise your right hand up. Just repeat after me. I state your name.
I, Lauren Richardson,
Do solemnly affirm
do solemnly affirm
that I will faithfully execute
that I will faithfully execute
the office of SORC Administrator
the office of SORC Administrator
of the UMBC Student Government Association,
of the UMBC Student Government Association,
and will, to the best of my ability, promote and defend the interests and well-being
the interests and well-being
of UMBC's undergraduate students.
of UMBC's undergraduate students.
Yep, me.
Oh, it's okay.
Me.
I just got back from Vermont, so I'm.
Alright, so now we're gonna go into the confirmation of Alex Johnson as member of the Appeals Board. Hi, Alex. Hi.
Sorry.
Oh, you don't have to. So everyone basically goes, oh, well, where did everyone go? Okay. So basically, everyone knows what the Appeals Board member does now. We don't need to go to that again. So Alex, do you mind just giving a brief explanation of who you are, any experience you've had, interest in SGA, things like that?
Okay.
Can I motion to suspend until we get back? Is that not a motion I can make?
You can.
I move to suspend the confirmation until they get back from the bathroom.
Second.
Is anyone opposed?
Fun fact, you didn't actually do that because your frockers are still set.
We can do whatever we want.
No, so I actually can't do
No,
that.
it's just, well, I mean, it's specific.
Why can't we, I can't really vote.
Probably I mean, you can just say, you don't need to put it to the board, you can just say report.
Well, Kai has something to share for the group.
Well, I just wanted to add, awesome, this is not that, boom, upload. Alright, so, when we met with the, associate students of UNM, they said that, undergraduate students, if they want to be within a committee, they can fill out an application that can be approved through the Senate. And I thought that was interesting, and maybe we could possibly do that, like, if a student wants to be a part of, an SGC, as a student, not as a affiliate with SGA or anything. And it's different from like, within like the Senate position.
So don't they already do that in certain committees?
They do.
So it's already within your guiding documents, but you can appoint
Yeah.
non-senators to SGCs. The only issue is that there's a limit to how many undergrad rounds there can be. So we
Right.
prefer that they be but like you can do that.
Right. You can appoint students to come if they want, but it's not like a public open. I just thought that this could be more of like a formal documentation kind of thing.
Yeah, for sure.
But if, I mean, like, I said like, what the, up to the effort or like the application itself. That's something you can do.
I think that's a good idea. Get more student engagement.
Yeah, like, 'cause I remember people coming to my office, I was asking, was like, hey, how do I be a part of the student guiding committee? And I'm like, I think you have to be appointed by the Senate, a senator.
Well, we don't even know for that.
Yeah, but like, if they wanted to be like, more part, you know, like,
It changes every year. There's something new.
There are official shared boundaries, and then there are these like parking and dining that we just sit on. So there's a lot.
but yeah, what do y'all think? And I don't wanna take up Alex's time, but this is.
Well, we're getting into the meeting stuff.
Oh, it's okay. Yeah, what do you think?
I like that idea.
It does give more access. It's just like if the students say like, oh, they feel like they're not represented on the campus at this point, it's like, well, you don't have to excuse this one because it's literally open. Any student can apply and be on one of certain committees that's not already like filled. So you gotta get representation, it's up to you to actually utilize it.
No, I think that's a good idea, but I also think that you were elected to represent them in these types of situations.
Right.
And if they wanted to be a part of that, you know, they should run for the position and get it in. That's something you have.
You have to be on this line.
other students should probably be like put forth to do that. Like if the senators are like, you know, they're like, you know, too much on their plate already, then we see them use other students that are like interested or passionate about this certain community. Then they should.
Thank you. Just for the sake of time, I'll just table this and go back to our conversation. Right, so, Alex, do you mind explaining about yourself and your interest in SGA, things like that? Hello, my name is Alex. I'm a junior global studies major, MCS certificate. I heard about the appeals board through Kai, and at first I was kind of like, I don't know what that is, but I did like a little bit of, you know, big girl research, and I was like, this actually sounds quite interesting. So, I am part of the student events board, so that's not like a big secret. I'm an event programmer there. I also served on like, it's kind of like the appeals board. It's the standards board for my sorority, so I served on that like committee, and I kind of made sure that people were following like our bylaws and things like that. So I'm kind of familiar with like how those kinds of laws work. But I am also part of the Commons Renovation Committee, so I felt like that was another big part of me. So yeah, and I feel like this is a good way to like kind of be involved in like, I guess, sorry, I have like car lag brain. I just came back from Vermont, so I'm a little like, yeah. If you have any questions for me? Yes.
So Alex, I've seen your hard work. I know you're putting hard work from all the events that you put on and all that. So there's no joke that you are able to manage your time and all that. But being part of SEB and sorority and committee and all that is a lot of time.
Yeah.
We usually tend to stray away from time commitment questions because everyone can make time. But again, SEB is a huge commitment that even I couldn't even think of, taking on. So how do you plan to manage your time once you're on the appeals board, if you're on the appeals board?
Yeah, so for me, I don't know, I guess I just kind of got lucky this semester, but most of my classes fall like after like business hours, so like 4:30 to 7. I have 3 of them throughout the semester. And most of my office hours tend to be kind of really early or really late in the day for SEB. So on Mondays I have like a 10:30 to 11:30, and then like Wednesdays I have like a 3 to 4. So they're very short chunks of time where it's kind of like flexible work as well. So like if there's things going on in the office, I'll make sure they happen, but like I'm not constantly like SEB. Like I can also like do other things as well. And then for the most part, I have like pretty big gaps in my schedule that I could like dedicate for the appeals board as well. Because I feel like most times when appeals board would be like kind of called together, it would probably be during business hours. So I feel like that's kind of convenient.
Also, for the health of this appeals board meeting,
They only convene when there's an issue. So
how many issues have there been in the past?
So 2 years ago, they did not convene at all, and then last year they convened once.
Okay.
Yeah, and for 10 minutes.
Yeah, it's fun.
If there's no more questions, I'd like to move to approve AL 06-1920. Second.
All those in favor? 9-0-2. Motion passes.
Yeah. I'll put it in the wording.
Alright, so just real quick, would anyone like to continue the discussion that we were having before Sabbath? Alright, all those in favor of continuing Kai's discussion?
Wait, what's the discussion?
It was about, what was it about again, Kai?
It was about this committee application.
Yes, the committee application, I'm sorry. I'm just gonna assume no one's in favor.
Oh, are we voting right now?
Yeah.
Okay. We're kind of-
In favor? Alright, I'll extend it for 5 more minutes.
Okay, sure.
If I may, I just wanted to kind of clarify, like, this is different in a way where it would be the responsibility of a Senate position. This is more for clarification for the students themselves. If they wanted to be a part of the committee, because I've had people come to me during my office hours, like, I want to be more a part than just receiving information.
Just a quick question. Are SGCs not open to public?
Technically,
Well, some of them you can apply for, but I just was already closed. So like, I also have a question. So like, if we were to put someone on SG, we just draft legislation for that and just vote them in as usual? Is that it?
For a committee?
Yeah, like what Kai's talking about.
To confirm
Like
it.
if we wanted a
Like a
non-SG
confirmation.
person on like dining committee or something, or.
Oh, like just to be the person, yes, yes.
Confirmation of insert name here as.
To sit on an SGC? Yes.
Or were you talking
But
like
that's not
more
what you're
casually?
talking
More casually, just sitting in on a meeting. Like, because I know it's closed.
Should we open the class?
I don't think it's necessarily closed. I don't know if students ever tried to sit in on it.
Yeah.
So there's a limit to how many representatives from each senate can be at like official shared governance committees. But for the non-official ones, like parking and dining, I think it's open up.
So you just have to like contact whoever's the head of that. Yes.
Personally, for me, I think the only one that makes sense would be like athletics, because none of us are athletes, so we're not really necessarily close to the issue. But other than that, nothing really jumps out on my mind that necessarily we would need to appoint someone.
I don't feel like you have to be that thing to be on.
Certainly, but it certainly helps.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's an issue of necessity, but just if people are interested and want to have a say in whatever's happening in a committee, right, then I feel like they should be able to be there, I guess. Even if it's like we don't need them to speak, but it's not like we're going to speak on them. Or if they want to speak on their own behalf, that's fine, in my opinion.
And if I can get more information, I got their contact information. I can ask them more, clarify more. It was just an idea that I thought.
I think it's a really good idea. So I feel like people feel like certain things are closed off, only like SG exclusive, so it might be a good way to kind of open up things on campus. Does anyone have any more discussion points?
How about this?
Yes.
I think the only caveat is that, so what's the carrot or the stick to keep someone going to this meeting? Right? For you, it's that you know that it's part of your job and that SRC and all that fun stuff. So for someone who's just committed to that, maybe he's not paid because I don't know, it feels sort of weird to me to pay someone to just sit in on a meeting every 2 weeks like that. You know what I mean? So I just wonder what keeps them from going.
Well, for that, I think that if we appoint or if there's somebody who's interested in serving on one of these committees specifically, then we should also, that shouldn't change how we assign ourselves to the committees, right? We should just try and get that person in addition to senators, and that way they're both there, right? So you have the paid position, which is responsible, because that's part of our responsibilities. Huh?
Thank you. I just want to say, like, it's up to their discretion also. It's like, they're not forced to be there. It's just for their.
Sure, but I think that if you're saying at SGA, we would like to bring this person to this committee meeting, and then that person consistently doesn't show up, they're looking at SGA. Be like, why isn't your person showing up? But I do appreciate the thought of, there's still someone from Senate going. It's not an or, it's an and, right? So, and that being able, especially for the committees where there's not a limited number of seats, they'd be open to saying, hey, we'd like to expand this to just regular students, can we bring one more person? Knowing that they can say no, but to be able to continue to provide other students opportunity to be involved in your job. If you can get it to work, you can get buy-in from the communities.
So I had a question. Why are SGCs closed to public when the senators relate almost all the information that happens to it to the meeting, which is live streamed to the whole student body? So what's the point of keeping it closed to student body in the first place?
Is it more just like I don't know, I'm just saying like a speculation, but is it more just like of a cap, like amount of people like be there, or they want like regular attendance?
couldn't be like
I think
open.
it's the fact that like they have the 2 representatives from each senate, and they want it to be those representatives, and they don't want any one senate to like, I guess, have more of a voice. But that's a conversation we've been having too. Is like if there's so many more undergraduate students, so wouldn't you want more voices?
Yeah.
Which is a separate conversation.
I mean,
But I think that's why.
I don't think it necessarily should be like the voice, even if they want to sit and see what's happening. I think that should be open, but
Something to contact the chairs of the committee about.
Yeah.
To ask.
Just in respect of time, do we want to continue this discussion or? So then I adjourn the meeting at 7:21.
Well, I have updated department services. Kind of a real big one too. The dissect of these services. I thought you guys were doing this.
She wasn't here when we played the key.
That's true.
How's
So Candace, can I unadjourn? Is that okay?
Reconvene.
Oh yeah, we should be the meeting for.
Yes, do it.
5 minutes at 7:21.
No, she's here to provide an update on behalf of someone who's absent.
So Hadai and I both attended. The reason why I would like to bring this is because they're moving pretty quickly on it. The main thing, and I have other updates to give, but I'd like to give the most important one first, is that Parking Service is looking at increasing the amounts per citation. So the citations you currently get for parking improperly, not without a permit, they're looking at increasing those prices pretty drastically. I think it's like $10 increase for most of them. Improper parking is going from 20 to 75. If you don't renew your permit on time, it's a $10 fee. If you have 2 cars on campus, like you only get like 1 car on campus per permit. So if you catch with 2, that's a $50 fine. They're increasing no dollar permit from 40 to 50. Like these are all numbers that the committee has brought to us. Because the diamond kind of like made a point like we should have public comment on this. They agreed to that, which is why I'm bringing it to you guys. I'm putting Wongoy in contact with the chair of that, and I hope that he can come in to kind of also talk about this situation. But they're slating for these new things to go into effect spring 2020. So basically January 1st is when they want to change over with new and increased fines for a lot of stuff. And I figured that it's probably best if you guys heard about this and could start gathering opinion and stuff. Granted, things are probably going to be going up no matter what we say, but probably we can negotiate on prices or what seems fair. Because as the committee sees it, there's quote unquote enough spaces on campus for one who has a permit, but I completely understand why there are people who would park the way that they do, because lot 25 is incredibly not safe to walk at night, filled with lighting and all that. So I see what lot 25 is all the way down Butler, and then you have to turn this way and go into the corner. It's basically in the neighborhood. I can pull up a map to show you.
What's the motivation behind this is it because they want more money, or is it because to disincentivize people from parking?
Disincentivize right now. They don't get the revenue. So any funds from that don't really go to parking services for the parking that they acquire. And they wanted to make me make a note that the prices for fines are still drastically lower than they are at most universities around Maryland.
Yes. Where are they getting these numbers? Are they arbitrary or?
I think the $10 was just like a way to do the disincentivization. I don't know if they were arbitrary, but I don't think they're hammered or hard facts either. I think they're just looking for increases, so $10 makes sense here. 4 to 50 makes it, it's like not a huge increase, but it is still an increase to disincentivize. But yeah, so I'll bring that to you guys, so can you kind of get that on your mind, and then hopefully someone from that committee can come in here and talk to you guys more about that situation, since you guys are really the voice on that, and I was just sitting with that as a favor. But some interesting stuff that you might find is that electric charging stations more are being added to campus. So if people have electric cars, they're adding in 8 to lot 7 or lot 9, which is the one across from Cobb, and 10 to the Walker Avenue garage. So the Walker Avenue garage, currently there's like the top part is like half seat and half paid to park there. They're going to renovate 10 spaces from the paid to park them into electric car charging stations. So I thought that was pretty cool.
Do you know how much that costs?
To park there and charge?
To renovate those 2 lots for.
They're just adding in the charging stations and linking power to them. It's not going to cause an increase in cost anywhere.
Like how much would it cost to renovate?
Oh, that I don't know. They just indicate that they're doing it, so it's going to happen. It's already on the plan.
I want to make note that Maryland does give tax breaks for people for places that do implement electric charging stations. They'll probably save a lot of money.
We don't make that.
Well, like they have some kind of subsidy, I'm sure.
Yeah, so they indicated this is where they were starting. They're hoping to increase from there. Currently there's 2 and it's maybe 5, but this is where their increase is going.
Any other questions?
One more, accessible parking, since they're putting in more, charging stations, are we talking about that?
Accessibility parking, I think it's currently staying as is. There have been many complaints according to the committee in terms of people with disabilities not getting their handicap parking spots, and people who park in handicap parking they're not supposed to, are going to slap with a $250 fine, so.
Great.
I can continue, if you guys have additional concerns, I can definitely bring up some information for that out. I can let you guys see, hopefully work on that. But yeah, so, proper parking is 20 to 75, closing signs is 40 to 50, shared hit is 50, for running out of your pay station, that's from 20 to 25. And then they're also gonna do, if your tags are expired in your car, that's gonna be a $40 fine in addition to having to put those on. And then they're also increasing their late fees. So after like 30 days, it's like an increase of $5. That's pretty much it. What they're doing now is that if it's late for 30 days, it's gonna be a $10 charge, and then an additional $20 added on to that after 45 days of not paying your citation. And then if you appeal your citation and it gets denied, it's going to be a $15 processing fee instead of a $7 processing fee.
Sorry, one more, where do complaints go for like parking issues?
Parking services, I believe they have an email on their
Parking
website.
at UMBC,
Parking agency, yeah. But to help out with some of this stuff, for the gated park spaces, they're looking at a mobile app to kind of increase, like a mobile app so you can pay on that app instead of like going and typing your license plate number and all of that. And they're looking at replacing the gate at lot 8. And the Commons project, which is the one to like get the how many spaces are available board, they're still working on that. Hopefully it should be done by the end of the semester, but it's already been delayed a year because I remember giving this report last year at the exact same time. So we'll see how it goes. That's all I have. Sorry about that.
Wait, is that the sensors where it's like?
Yeah, the sensors. So it's Project Light Up is currently working needs to be configured. So the indicator on the Commons garage shows how many spaces are left in the garage.
I don't even understand the part of these.